these are the mistakes I just wanted to share with you and then to bring to your notice that overfeeding or underfeeding protein is a mistake. And also irregular feeding schedule is also a mistake to you. And overfeeding carbohydrate aspect and also denying the pigs the right fiber, rice bran and then wheat bran is also a mistake we are making. And also not giving the feed and also formulating feed based on the weather. It is also affecting them. And the worst of it is that we don't track. If you're not tracking, you can't note what is happening. Top 5 mistakes that we make when we are feeding our pigs. The first one is underfeeding or overfeeding protein. We know what protein does to pigs when it is in their food. It helps them to grow very well and to build muscles for us. So if you underfeed, that is where their pigs will not be growing fine. And they will look very skinny. You see like very slim, lean and long. You yourself, you can see that at least they are lacking some nutrients in them. And that is the work of protein if it is not in the diet of your pigs. So underfeeding protein leads to stunted growth and it also leads to some weakened piglets. That is, a pig is pregnant and the protein is not sufficient for it during that time also. The piglets will come out very weak and very smallish. You see them looking that way, very small. Underfeeding affects the pigs and overfeeding also affects you, the farmer. Here's why. Overfeeding, we know the cost of protein currently on the market. It is one of the most expensive things we have in our feed formulation. Soya bean like this, you can attest to it, and also the fish meal. And that is the main reason why we are now trying to find some alternative means of feeding pigs. So if you're overfeeding, it is a mistake because it will definitely end up eating into your profits. So the best thing is to strike a balance. And to do that right, there's always a recommended range for you to feed the protein aspect in every feed. For piglets, that is the winners, the percentage should be between 18 to 25%. For growers, 15 to 18%. And then for finishers, it should be below 15, so 10 to 12 is okay. And the next one is also about neglecting essential amino acids. A farmer can start feeding his pigs without adding any amino acid component to it. We have the lysine, which is the most popular one in pig's feed, and you have the methionine. But for the lysine, it is always recommended that you have it in your feed, simply because the function of an amino acid in the feed of your pig is to help it build the muscles. Fish meal and even the soya bean they take, they all contain some level of amino acid in them. But the reason it is recommended to add amino acids, specifically the lysine, into the feed of your pig is that for the pigs, they can't produce amino acid by themselves. So it is always good for you to get the lysine, which is readily absorbable by the pigs. So if you incorporate that one directly into the pig does not have to do a lot of work to break it down to get the nutrients. But for you to also formulate the feed well with the right amino acid components, for every 1 ton of feed, you need to get 1 kg of lysine in the feed. So that is the composition. 1 ton is equal to 1 kg of lysine. If maybe it is a 500 kilograms of feed you are formulating, you know that you need 0.5 or half a kg of lysine. And the next mistake, which is the third one we make, is inconsistent feeding schedule. Yes, this I've talked about it a number of times on the channel. Pigs are some animals that they are very sensible and very sensitive. They follow some routine and pattern. So if you are feeding them, make sure your feeding is always consistent. Assuming you start feeding them early in the morning by 8 a.m. they have fed, and then in the evening 4 p.m. they have fed also. Do your best to stick with that schedule. Don't confuse your pig. So if you feed in that way, it means the next day 8 and then you repeat 4. There's no way you should go back and feed your pig maybe 6 a.m. in the morning and then in the evening 4, and the next day you come back to feed at 10 a.m. Then you feed them at 4 or 5. You are confusing your pig, and they work with routine. They are very sensible animals, and the more you keep doing that, you are disturbing their system. And you know, pigs, there are some animals that hate stress. The moment you keep stressing them in that way, it is going to affect their growth, simply because instead of them to channel that feed they have taken into building body mass, which is the weight we want, they will now use that same energy and the nutrient they have gotten from the feed, they will channel it into trying to adjust their system. So at the end of the day, the pig will be alright, but the weight will not be given, and it is always going to go against you, the farmer. So let's ensure that you or your farm attendant knows that at every time your feeding schedule is supposed to be consistent. If it is 8 a.m., stick to it. So you see somebody will feed a pig 8 a.m. today, then following day around 10 a.m. or even 9:30 or some even 11, And when that happens, they try to feed the pig once a day, which is not good for you. So stick with a consistent schedule. Look at your farm's activity and structure it so that you can always attend to your pigs. If you have some accommodation on your farm and there's that kind of consistent schedule, if somebody enters your farm, assume you didn't lock it that day, somebody enters there around that a time that your pigs are not expecting you, they begin to make some noise. That one will even trigger you to know that somebody has entered or there's a strange thing happening on the farm. So you just get up and go there and check. But if you have been confusing them back and forth, if somebody even goes there, your security it will be at risk. So once you're also sticking to the consistent feeding schedule, you should ensure that the feed is enough for all the pigs. Spread it in the, if it is a bowl, spread it so that all the pigs involved will have access to it at the same time to avoid competition. If there are some active ones, more active ones among them, because you have not been very consistent and regular, if you drop the feed, that more active ones will start to outcompete the less active ones. And if that happens, some will be starved. So you need to ensure that you spread the feed so they can all have access to it at the same time. And the next one is overfeeding carbohydrates and underfeeding the fiber component. Carbohydrate, yes, gives the energy, and fiber helps to break down the carbohydrate so that the pig can absorb the nutrients. So the more energy you put into the feed of your pigs, the more fiber you should add to ensure that obesity does not set in. If the feed is not really broken down well, so that the pig will utilize all the nutrients, and it keeps accumulated in some part of the body. That is where the overweight will set in. If overweight set in growers, fine, you might get the desired weight. But if it is in the breeding stock, there's a problem. That is where your sow will not even try to show signs of heat at all. And even if it shows signs of heat and it is crossed successfully, you will not like the piglets that will come out of it. So if the pig even gets pregnant and at the following stage, the pig will find it very difficult to contract its muscles in order for the piglets to come out. And that is where you see the pig will be doing its best, but the contraction is not attaching the muscles. So generally speaking, for the fiber, that is the rice bran and the wheat bran, if you're feeding it to piglets and then growers, the ratio should be, the percentage should be 3% to 5%. And for the sows and other breeding stock, the boars and the finishers, you can have them in 6% to 10%. So you keep them in shape. And the next mistake we make is that we don't adjust the feed based on the weather. Look up into the sky, observe the weather. If it is cold, pigs will eat more and drink less. If it is in a hot weather, they eat less but drink more. So you should always adjust it. You don't have to stick to a particular quantity. Assuming you are always feeding them 3 kg each day, don't stick to it all the time. Know that if the weather is very cold, you can increase it to 4, and if it is too warm or too hot, you can reduce it. Instead of the 3, you can come back to 2 or 1.5. The pigs should be okay. If maybe it's in a hot weather, the only thing you can do is give the feed in small amounts, but the protein aspect should be more. Okay, so that is why you have to really adjust your feeding formula. If maybe you were using 18% protein, now you increase it to maybe 22% of protein, and you reduce the corn and bring it down. Okay, so the weather will also influence how you structure or how you formulate feed for your pigs. Assuming you are not using this automation and in an enclosed structure like that, and you're doing it as a typical African farm here would do, look at the weather and adjust the feeding accordingly. There's no way you should always stick to a particular feeding schedule all the time and giving the same quantity. So at one point you will stress the pig and you're depriving the pig of the right nutrients. And at another point you'll be overgiving the feed than the pig will need. So you need to always ensure that you adjust. Cold weather, they eat more, drink less. Warm weather, they eat less, they drink more. So if that happens in the warm weather, it means that your water should always be available at any time. The water should be available for the pig. And as a bonus point, you need to also adjust and also monitor and track the weight as well as the growth of your pigs. And with that, you have to work with the FCR, which we say feed conversion ratio. I've also made a video on that, and very soon I'm sure you get to see it. There will be some instance where you have a group of pigs. Some will be growing faster than others. You isolate those that are not growing. It means the formula is not working for those pigs. Separate them and keep them in a different room and test them also with another formula. Once you stick with the old one that is already working for those that are growing well. And in no time, you see that the new formula that you have adjusted, usually the protein part is where we adjust. So once you have adjusted the protein part and maybe reduce the fiber side of it, you see that the pigs will start to shoot up in their growth and they will catch up with those that are already taking the lead. But to do that right, you should monitor the pigs, and also weigh them regularly to ensure that they're always on track. So these are the mistakes I just wanted to share with you, and then to bring to your notice that overfeeding or underfeeding protein is a mistake. And also irregular feeding schedule is also a mistake to you. And overfeeding carbohydrate aspect, and also denying the pigs the right fiber, rice bran and then wheat bran, is also a mistake we are making. And also not giving the feed and also formulating feed based on the weather. It's also affecting them. And the worst of it is that we don't track. If you're not tracking, you can't note what is happening. So it's also a mistake we need to, and we have to reverse everything to ensure that our farm is always a profitable one.